Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking about the changes that midlife brings about in our friendships. Join us as we explore companionship versus friendship, how to come out of a friend desert, and ways to deepen relationships in this phase of life. Let's get started. Listeners, the changes that come about in midlife can affect many areas of our lives, but the one we're going to focus on today is friendship. We recently received an email that got us thinking, and we'd like to share some of that before we begin. And she said, I feel like I'm in a cultural/friend desert since the pandemic and have not been able to restore my community and friend base since then. It feels like everything hit the fan, and the fallout, among other things, was that my community and baseline friendships either shifted or never came back. Nothing has been the same, and it's almost like I'm trying to rebuild, but all the pieces are missing. I'm very much an introvert, so I don't need a lot of friends, but 2 or 3 who value and make time and agree that friendship doesn't just work on its own and it takes intentionality. Instead, I know a lot of people. I have the numbers of my kids' friends' parents. I have quick surface conversations at school and sports events, and maybe that has to be enough for now. All that to say, I wish I knew 3 people like you in real life, and I so appreciate the hour each week of grounded, relevant discussion. Though I'm such a believer of not substituting the internet for real life, sometimes it helps to fill the gaps for a season. Thank you for being that for me right now. And that was such a sweet email and also sobering at the same time because she really hit on a lot of topics and a lot of issues that I think that may not even come across to listeners, that we have all felt this way at times. Even though we laugh and talk for an hour a week, doesn't mean that we never feel these feelings that she's describing. And I emailed her back, and then she emailed me back, and she said, I really appreciated Mindy's vulnerability in sharing her feelings about being discouraged in a new community. That's the healing balm around sharing. I learned a long time ago that if I'm feeling or experiencing something that feels unique to just me, chances are there are more people out there feeling the same thing. So I just think that this really made us want to talk about this because, Julie and Mindy, have you guys felt these feelings? I mean, I know you have, but maybe you can talk a little bit about it before we get started.
Yeah, I mean, when I read her email, it was sobering, and it did bring back a lot of memories. Like, I'm not necessarily experiencing that now, but I know I have, and I have really clear memories of that and how it felt. And so I really wanted to talk about this today to not give the impression that our friendships are always just all great and we never struggle. And the fact that she wrote this does mean that there are, 10 more that feel just like her, or 20 more, she's the only one that maybe wrote about it, but that I think it's a common concern.
My heart just went out to her. My heart breaks for her. And at the same time, it's such a familiar feeling. And I know you guys both agreed with that as well. I even got together this morning with a friend to go walking, and this was the topic of our conversation. She is new to the area, has been here, I think it was just a little over a year. And so not only for herself, her husband, but then helping her children navigate it as well, from that role. It is not unique to each of us. And I think that there are different seasons. Like Julia mentioned, you've had it in the past. And I think that it can come and go depending on where you're at in life. So we talk about friendship a lot, and I think it's worth the time. And I'm excited for just the kind of the viewpoint that we're going to take today to delve in.
Why do you think friendships can be somewhat vulnerable in midlife? Because I do think that they are vulnerable at other times, but they're also uniquely vulnerable in midlife. And what do you think contributes to that?
Well, like we talk about on almost every other episode, how much our bodies are changing physically, our emotions, our minds, and our responsibilities are changing. And, life is demanding. Some of us still have kids at home while being caregivers for adult parents. Some of, maybe still working. And then we add grandkids, it's a lot. And those things are going to affect friendships. And then to think if we're in midlife and our friends are in midlife, they are also experiencing that. And unfortunately, it seems like some friendships don't survive those changes. Doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that way, but it does happen.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're at a really vulnerable point in life where we are letting our children go. We may have had to let a parent go or a friend. I think that we might be dealing more with health issues. We have a lot more fears. We're looking at the rest of our life. We're no spring chickens anymore. All of the insecurities and our failings are kind of like right in front of our faces, and our bodies might be failing us in a way that we're not used to. I mean, I just think you're probably grappling with a lot of emotions, and you're kind of, midlife can be the start of the second half of your life. And that can be daunting because we know way too much in our heads. And I think it could be easy to overthink that. Also, friendship, to be honest, is sometimes the last priority. When I'm thinking about all the different roles that you just mentioned, Julie, the things that we have to do in a day, or, work, commitments, people, the roles that we play, then I think that sometimes friendship is very low. We want it, we desire it, we need it, but we don't always necessarily make that a priority and take the time to cultivate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so true. We want those friends to be there, but then when life's busy, we're not, we forget to foster them and encourage them,
Mm-hmm.
Just happens.
I was thinking about midlife, and I think that we do experience this throughout life, but what I was thinking about that was different about midlife is I think that there's so many different paths to take in midlife, and people start separating off. And like when you're young and you're all in school together, well, you have this great big common denominator, and then you're in college together, and then you're newlyweds and you're raising young kids. But then I feel like when your kids start to be old enough to stay by themselves, then there starts to be a big switch because one, the kids are super busy and they need to be driven everywhere. And two, I think that parents feel the freedom to start to pursue other interests, like maybe some of them go back to work or they start a side hustle or they move. Sometimes people divorce at that time. There's just a lot of different changes that can come at that time. And so I think that every time a path diverges amongst a friend group, there's going to be some friendships that don't survive that. And so it seems like by the time you get to midlife, after those paths have diverged multiple times, you've lost friends along the way. What do you think? I touched a little bit on them, but what are some of the factors or circumstances that you've seen change some friendships in your lives?
I appreciated all the thoughts that you included with this question, Julie. I'll just read them. Moving, divorce, deaths, illness, change, inabilities, crisis. Honestly, my answer is kind of tongue in cheek, but I'm like, any change that happens makes it difficult, kind of depending on what roles you're playing, what you're trying to pursue. I know I find myself in senior season, with my high schooler. And then one week I've got a million things to do. And then the next week I'm like, who am I? What's going on? And I have some space and, oh, where's my friends? Oh, I haven't even thought about it. I just think that anytime we're coming in and out of the realization, either we have friends we're cultivating or we're looking, we're missing.
I was thinking about some of the big things, and I'm sure this has affected you, Mindy, but even myself, like moving a bunch of times in the first 10 years of marriage, that affected a lot of friendships. If you change churches, that can affect a lot of friendships. If your kids change schools or they quit a sport that they've been doing for years and you've built up a community along that, and then all of a sudden they're not doing that every weekend. Like there's a lot of just, I think, physical proximity that goes into maintaining friendships. And when you're not around someone or seeing them on a regular basis, it's hard to keep up friendships. At least it is for me. I don't know if you guys find that to be the case.
Yeah, definitely. It's not that you don't care about these people. It's just, it is harder to maintain. I thought about moving. I haven't moved that much, but I know I have a friend who has, and, she said she has to fight against the feeling of why make friends? I know I won't be here very long, It's just not worth the effort, or it hurts too much to let them go. Those are real feelings. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately with John's illness, like how it shifted friendships. Not that friendships went away, they just changed. And then with his death, it's like I'm a different person. So I feel like people was almost like I was reading something the other day, like I'm having to process a lot more than just John's death. Like the part of me that lived in relationship to John has died. The part of me that shared like all our memories has died. The part, like I'm a different person. I think people might relate to me differently now. Like in a group of friends, like if John is gone, we all miss him, but I miss what John brought out in them. Like that's it has a ripple effect. Like, oh, I won't ever see Steve's reaction to one of John's jokes or stories again. You know what I mean? Like it's more than just that loss. There's a change in the people around that no longer have things brought out by John. So I don't know. It just got me thinking about friendships and how things shift and in subtle ways, but it's just kind of like an onion unfolding that I'm just now like processing. Like it's not even coming to my mind till very recently of how there's more change to come. And that's not easy.
No.
One topic of conversation my friend and I talked about this morning, and for her, the change was moving, but we'll kind of describe that as kind of the past or having something that you are forced to let go of. And we were talking in relation to her son, and I was commiserating with her because I had a son that struggled moving here and leaving behind friends and, everything. The conversation kind of went like, well, if you're always looking back and trying to recreate and trying to continue exactly what you had, you can't look forward and have something new. But, sometimes we choose change and sometimes change is forced upon us. But to be able to move forward, you are different. And it's going to be different people that you are finding in this new season. And so it's uncomfortable and it's hard, but to move forward, you have to look forward. You can't always be looking back.
Well, what does a friend desert feel like? Even if you don't happen to be in one, you probably felt that way. And Julie, I don't know if this is appropriate in this podcast, but I can remember John and Steve having a conversation and Steve telling me about it later, where John basically said, and it's true, that women basically are always feeling like they don't have friends. You ask any woman at any time and they'll tell you they don't have any friends. They're always whining about how they don't have any friends.
Yep.
And so do you remember his thoughts on that, Julie?
Please share.
I think I remember more of the situation than those thoughts.
Okay.
We're always whining about not having friends. I love it.
And so, at least from a male perspective, I don't know if males even feel like they have a friend desert, but I know that women do. And I think it's pretty common. Like, I think pretty much all women have felt this way at one time or another. And most people have probably shared it with their husband.
Probably John's response to me would have been like, well, have you called so-and-so? Have you called, like, just call them. Just
fix it, Julie, fix it.
Yeah. Like, they're there. Just go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the friend desert phrase, though, it just is like this sick feeling in the pit of your stomach. It just feels so lonely. It feels like you'll never get out, kind of like you're in quicksand, maybe. And it makes me think of that saying, when people say they can be lonely even in a big group of people. Because I don't know, it's just like this sense of belonging is missing. The people are there, but you just want to belong and feel a closeness that kind of has this security and stability. And I guess men don't get that from friends. Maybe that's the difference. That's something that we're looking for in friends that they're not. I don't know. But to kind of go along with the desert metaphor, I think friends are like an oasis in the desert, but like an oasis, it can be hard to find, like they're not,
Right.
It's not always easy to find those people.
Yeah. I feel like a friend desert is very dry and the opposite of nurturing. Like it feels like very hard ground, and it feels like maybe the times when you're instigating get-togethers and stuff like that they're kind of just falling on hard ground and they're not really taking root. Like it doesn't matter how you try to go about it, whether it's coffee or lunch or asking someone to do something, you just can't get the feeling of a friendship going.
Or it's not reciprocated.
Right.
Yeah,
True.
is that what like maybe they accept, but you just never hear back or.
Yeah.
And I have a couple thoughts on this. First, I do believe men struggle with it. Different men that maybe are willing to talk about it. And then also I do believe that sometimes this is real. This is really happening. And sometimes I do think it's imagined.
Oh, yeah.
Like training our mind and our thoughts is very difficult. And one of the things we've talked about different ways to try to tackle the desert feeling. But when I'm truly feeling that alone and that isolated, the Lord becomes very, very close, because he's the only one that I feel that I can cry to, reach out to. And I need someone to see me, and I know that he does. And so in those desperate times, that's when I really do reach there. And so I would encourage you to go there. And then also it leads me to be praying for eyes to see the people that need me as much as I need them, maybe opportunities to serve with other people, to get to know some new people, or just an awareness of who's already there. Maybe I haven't noticed.
Yeah, I'm looking back at the email to see what the listener had written in, and she said that she does have a lot of contacts, like she has the contacts of her friends' parents, and she is coming in contact with people. She's not just sitting at home isolated. She obviously is out in her community with her kids, but I do think that it's all probably superficial, and I think that's kind of what I was talking about on how it's just not sinking into the hard ground. It's like all these superficial contacts, but none of it's really taking root. And
Yeah,
I've been in those seasons before. I feel like some of that is due to busyness. I don't think it's probably that any person is saying, I don't like you or her or whoever's listening right now. I think it's probably that the people are also in super busy seasons of lives. And if they're not feeling the need for a new friend, they just might not be receptive to advances. Advances is probably not the right word, but I can't think of what it would be. And Mindy, I think you kind of talked about this a little bit last year, in that sometimes you reach out to people and you can just tell they don't have space for you. Not that they wouldn't like you, but they just don't have space.
And that's where the prayers of, okay, who does? Because we would all agree that we have felt that at some time or another. Sometimes we're the ones that don't have space. And I think that's good to recognize, so that we then forgive being offended when someone doesn't have space for us. I think we should have a right view of ourselves. And it's almost like, are you interested? Yes, no, maybe, like, where you at? And then, eventually you're going to find those people. But we would all agree that to be able to find those close friends, it's a gift. It is like a precious stone, and it's difficult, and it's hard, and it's rare. And so I would even say that we all know a bunch of people, but to be able to cultivate, you can only actually cultivate like just a few close friends, So.
Well, yeah, and she did mention that. She said, as an introvert, she said, I really only need 2 or 3 close friends. And so, if all the people you're coming in contact are that same way, everybody kind of feels like they've got all their friends. And I know I want friends, and I think I want a lot of friends, but then I realize I'm only really capable of managing and responding to a handful of people,
Right.
Because I'm not the greatest communicator, and as I'm sure you guys know,
we don't know that, Julie.
No, but even just responses, like I'm not quick to respond on a text or
you don't
whatever,
use any emojis when you're responding.
I know.
People
What's
think
up
you're
with that,
mad.
Julie?
It's like, oh, that's so draining. That's so draining.
No, it takes a lot of time. You're right.
It does. And so I feel like gosh, if I was doing this with 10 or 15 people, I'd just be dead.
Listen, Julie, we feel confident in your friendship, so don't see us as a burden. Okay. If I could reference something really quick, I actually got a listener question last week concerning our podcast. I didn't tell you guys about it on purpose because I wanted to talk to you about it on air. And it was a unique perspective, and it's concerning our relationship and friendship. I have never gotten this question, but somebody asked me a very vulnerable question, and it hit to a place in my heart that I have really prayed for amongst the three of us, our cord that is not quickly broken. We've talked about that before. She said, how does it feel to be the outsider? How does it feel that they get together all the time and you can't? I mean, I can't. She said, but they reference getting together a lot, and I know you're not in it. How do you feel about that? I was like, you're going to make me cry. Not that I feel left out, but my response was, and I want to get your thoughts on this because this is real. Like we do have a friendship. We are separated by states and distance, and I consider us friends. So my response is that, first of all, I hope that listeners can hear that you can have a friendship continue to be cultivated over distance. It will not be the same as when you're in person. Sometimes I do feel left out. At the same time, I'm confident in your friendship. Like those are only because I would love to be there. I know you would love to come here. I know that we would love to have more time together, but we're not given that gift right now. And so I wanted to bring that up and tell you guys, I did get that question. I think it was really neat that she mentioned our friendship because we do have a friendship, but it is unique because we meet once a week over Skype and we're texting ideas and it's a different type of relationship to have this podcast together and to talk about this. And so I wanted to go ahead and just put that out there.
I think probably the difference for you, Mindy, is that you know that if you lived here, you'd be going to the movies too. Like
Absolutely.
you don't have an insecurity where you're like, well, even if I was there, I don't know if I'd be invited. Do you think you feel that way? I feel like you should feel that way.
Oh, I know that 100%.
Okay.
Does it still hurt? Like, yeah, a little bit. I'm like, oh yeah, that's awesome. You guys, way to go.
Right.
Right. But I know, Mindy, that doesn't always take the feelings away because when I left Memphis, the hardest part was thinking about all my friends still getting together and I couldn't be there. Like I was jealous of like the inside jokes and the things that they were going to know about that I wasn't going to be a part of. And I knew if I were there, I'd be right there with them. So it does still hurt. And I was actually, I don't know. At first I didn't like to mention that when we got together, and then the movie thing came up and we started talking about it. And there was something kind of inside that I thought, oh, I hope Mindy's okay with that.
And I am. And I am. I just think that that's worth mentioning because we're doing our best.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
But like, this is real life. So it's just a different type of friendship for me. And so I do hope I can be a voice to, to say to the person that might feel that in a friendship, it doesn't mean anything less that I can't be there in the daily. It's just different.
Yeah. And I think we'll probably talk about this later when we talk about how friendships do change. But like with my long distance friends who I don't see very often, 2 or 3 times a year, I also know that they'd be there for anything. And they were, and they are. But my expectations are a lot different for them. I don't expect to hear from them every day. And I know I'm not going to run into, like it's just that expectation is taken off.
Right.
So I think friendships, there are different types of friendships. They don't all look the same.
Right.
Going back to the friend desert thing, what do you think has helped you get through those times of being in a friend desert?
With my friend this morning, we talked about just some helpful practical steps. So she's like, maybe I'll get a job. She's like, my youngest is going to go to kindergarten next year. I have some space and I don't have a lot of people. So maybe I'm going to meet people by going to work. She said, maybe I'll just work at Publix. She said, it doesn't really matter. But, like a part-time situation. Also the volunteering and serving. You guys, I just can't say enough about that. Even if you don't have space to give to a part-time job, maybe you have one day a week or one morning a week. There's so many opportunities to be able to serve alongside others. And by me saying yes to the pregnancy center, I have a whole new group of friends that are prayer warriors, and we go to different churches and we live different lives, and I only see them on Thursdays. And it's really been a wonderful new part of my life. So working, volunteering, Lord, help me have eyes to see.
Well, first of all, I'll just say that it's not a frivolous thing to want friends. Like, if you have a longing for that, it's because God created you that way, and it's worth pursuing. Like, keep looking. Like you, Mindy, I'm kind of realizing, and I'm not in a friend desert right now, but I am going through kind of a dark night of the soul experience. And I think in other times in my life, I've gone through dark nights that, something else was going on that maybe caused me to withdraw from people or not see my friends accurately. And I'm learning that whatever that feeling is that creates that friend desert, there are, and this may not be a popular answer, but there are treasures to be found in the dark, that there are good things to be had in those times that you don't easily find when everything is bright sunshine and roses. That's just true in life. And that's what I'm really learning right now, is that there are still good things in a hard story. Because I tend to want to get out of hard, yucky places very quickly. But instead of that, I'm learning to ask, why am I here and what can I learn? And so you learn things about yourself, and you learn to rely on the Lord, and you get closer to Him, because you realize there are some things that you're feeling that can only be satisfied by Him, not a friend, And I think knowing that even makes you have more freedom in friendship, that you're not putting more on a friend than they can be, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And so that makes your friendships better. But sometimes you have to learn that in a hard place.
Right. Well, C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Four Loves, he says that friendship must be about something. Do you find that to be true, and how?
Yeah, and I just wanted to give a little more insight, if you let me read something.
That'd be great.
Because I've got the book here. He has, in The Four Loves, one whole chapter is on friendship, love. And he said, friendship is the least natural of loves, the least instinctive, the least organic, biological, and the least necessary. He said, as a species, biologically, we don't have any need of it. Like, we can live and breed without it. And I thought that was funny. Like, he contrasted it with romantic love. Like, romantic love quickens your pulse, makes you blush. Like, it has a physical component to it. And it's very essential. Like, none of us would be here without it. But friendship is more of a choice, and it's freely chosen. But he said it has to be about something, like, even if it's just over enthusiasm for pickleball. Now, C.S. Lewis said dominoes, but since pickleball wasn't invented yet. But I just thought, I agree with that. I do think that friendships start over a common interest in something. He said, like, lovers stare at each other face to face, and they can learn about each other that way. He goes, friends, they walk side by side. They're not looking in each other's eyes. They're walking side by side, sharing some kind of common goal or whatever. So I know I found that true in my friendships.
I definitely find that true. I think that's why when we aren't sharing shared experiences on a regular basis, friendships start to fade, because you're not having those commonalities and those common things to bond over on a regular basis. And so it's hard to keep it up.
Right.
Yeah. I think when you work alongside someone, or you're going through a hard time or doing something strenuous, you just naturally connect. And I remember friendships that formed over mission trips, like, you just get in there and do hard work. You're going to find somebody to befriend. And I would say my longest lasting friendships were those that formed when either we were newlyweds or we were both having babies at the same time. Like those are my friendships that are still around. Because that was just such a strong connection.
Right. We've talked about friends of the heart and friends of the road before. And so I feel like that goes right here with this particular C.S. Lewis saying, book, whatever. But I do believe that there are friends of the heart, that it doesn't matter the roles you're playing or the seasons you're in. Those friends, there's a love there, a self-sacrificial love that carries you through. And then there's friends of the road that you may come and go. And those are the ones you're saying goodbye to more because you're there for a particular season or purpose or, opportunity or mission trip or whatever. You live near each other. Your kids are the same age. Just think about that, like those shared situations. But maybe those are the people you're saying goodbye to, like a friendship is there for a time and then you kind of move on. So thankfully with Facebook, we're able to keep up with all of our old friends now on Facebook. I'm sure it brings us all closer together. But I think it's okay to have friends of the road. I think we can grieve and we can be upset about letting go sometimes, but also just wondering, does that person need to become a friend of the heart? And do they want the same thing? Or do I need to let it go?
Well, what do you think the difference is between companionship and friendship? Julie, you made this a distinction.
Because C.S. Lewis talked about it in this chapter, like that he said companionship is kind of the matrix of friendship. Like friendships come out of companionship. Like I thought about example, like a book club. Everybody in the book club shares a love of reading, conversation, fellowship, but maybe like one or two in that book club will share something just a little bit more, like a special interest or a taste for something, and then they'll become best friends. And he said, these are the people that care about the same truth as you. And I love this little quote. He said, friendship arises out of companionship. When two or more of the companions discover that they have in common some insight or interest or even taste, which the others do not share, and which till that moment each believed was his own unique belief or treasure. So then somebody says, what, you two? I thought I was the only one. And I thought, isn't that the greatest feeling when you say that to someone, like even if you don't say it out loud, you feel it. And sometimes it's just like the tiniest little thing you have in common that makes this special connection. It's kind of funny how that happens.
I have a funny way to think about this. So I have a daughter, and I remember, talking about if she were ever attacked. Do not let them take you to a second location, right? So that's the saying. Don't go to a second location. Well, the difference to me between companionship and friendship is you're at that event with companions, either at the gym working out or that book club, and you take it to a second location.
That's a good way to put it, Mindy.
Going to coffee, going to lunch,
or
going
home
for a walk afterwards.
Yeah.
Yes,
right.
Going to a movie. Yeah.
No, that's a great thing. Yeah. I was laughing with another friend because I think that a lot of times men, we were kind of laughing about our husbands, they think of their companions as friends. But I think women have a much higher bar to call someone a friend. Like she said that another man said to her, oh, you're friends with so-and-so. Can you talk to her about X? And she said to herself, and maybe to him too, like, well, I mean, I know her. Like we're acquainted, but I don't know if we're friends. And I think that women really make that distinction. Like, well, I might be in a book club with her, but I don't know if we're friends. We're companions, but I don't know basically what if we take it to a second location. Whereas I don't know that my husband really thinks that way.
Well, Lewis was saying that he said, men from the beginning of time have drawn together, like to go hunting, to provide for their family, to hunt and kill. And while they're doing it, they talk shop, and that they have all these friendships. And he said, we don't care about their family, their wife, their job. It's just the thing we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and so at first I was like, no, this is not the way it is. And then at the end, he admitted, now I can't claim anything about women. This is only writing from a man's perspective. And I thought that is so true, because I've asked my boys when they've gone off with friends, they don't even know their last name sometimes. You know?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Like
they
much
never
less
know.
about their siblings and
Maybe
their
not even their
family.
first name.
I know. And I thought that is so true, that is just so different, that men and women are very different in that way.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me tell you something I've recently been convicted about, and I'm praying about, that God has just revealed to me, that moving to LaGrange has been a unique situation with friendships. In bigger cities, we've been able to be more compartmentalized. Like I see certain people here, I see certain people there, but in LaGrange, it's all the same people at all the same places.
Mm-hmm.
And it has brought out like this realization that the Silmans need to grow in this. We have not had to flex this type of muscle ever. It is very different. And so being able to put ourselves out there, something funny happened this weekend, just to kind of give a view of what this looks like. I had my daughter and her friend visit, who both live in bigger cities. They wanted to experience LaGrange, especially the friend.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is just, we went downtown and I took them literally, you guys, 3 places. It took us like 2 hours because everywhere we went, we saw people that we knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I've only been here almost 3 years, and they were worn out. They're like, wow, this is amazing. You see people everywhere, but they're like, I'm exhausted. Can we just go home? It's beautiful. Like, it takes a lot more time because you're seeing people and it's slower and it's sweet and you're talking, but also you're exhausted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Where can we find companions in midlife? Because I do think that for women, it starts out with companions. So one, where can we find companions? And then we'll talk about bringing a companionship into a friendship. Mindy, you always say that you find so many companions at the gym. I have never made a friendship out of the gym. I mean, I've had companions if I've been in like group. Hello, how are you? Maybe a Facebook friend, but I have never taken it to a second location.
No, me either.
So you're wondering what that looks like?
Yeah. How do you single those people out, Mindy? Like, what differentiates them?
Well, if we've made fun of each other during class,
Okay.
and we have the same sense of humor, which has happened. I even had someone reach out to me and said, hey, like, you're just not as joyful. Like, you always come in with a smile. And is everything okay? And I was like, whoa, and it had been like 2 years, and she said something like that. I have been attacked by a friend, and that was in Pennsylvania, my friend Katie, that we did have on the podcast. But she came up to me, and this was, she was a joyful ray of sunshine, but she was like, I just think we're supposed to be friends. And that has never happened to me. And it hasn't happened to me since. So if that ever happens to you, just say yes and follow.
That's really cool.
But you know what? Maybe you could be that person. Also, it depends on what you're doing at the gym. Mm-hmm. If you're just doing, like a boot camp style class, you may not interact as much. If you're just going to work out by yourself doing weights, you're not going to really meet people. I go to group fitness classes. There's a little more, like, you can interact here and there, but it does take time too. I haven't found like I wouldn't say like we're meeting for hours afterwards, but and especially like I mentioned here in LaGrange, those are the same people I'm seeing everywhere.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. Well, where are some places? I mean, I've found a lot of companionship on the pickleball court this year. I like to show up at the different open plays, and then you might see them in Kroger, or you might see them out walking for your dog. And it's always a shock too, because when you play pickleball, you look different than maybe when they see you at a different place. And so that's kind of fun too. But I feel like, and this was true even when my kids were in sports, I feel like sports can bring about a lot of companionships because, you have the same game schedule, you're offering to carpool, you're sitting in the stands. And it's like, okay, well, we're here to watch this baseball game for the next 2 hours. So let me find out a little bit about you. And then I'll follow up the next time I see you and we'll, know a little bit more about each other. So I think sport type things have always been a way that I've been able to make some companions, whether it was for myself or through my kids.
Yeah.
If I could point out just two things you said there that I want listeners to pay attention to what you just said, because it's very important. Showing up at the pickleball court, you can't be on your phone. Like you're looking and you're talking to people, you're interacting. So it takes that. It takes being open and available and looking and asking questions. And then you said something else that was crucial, and that was following up. When you have a conversation with someone on the ball field or at book club, remembering, like making them important and their situation important and following up.
I think for me, church is a good place that, that I have lots of companions. They don't always turn into friendships, but there are a lot of companions there. And then Bible studies, and particularly a Bible study that I'm doing in my neighborhood. So like you, Marie, I'm seeing some of these ladies on the pickleball court or at a canasta game or at the grocery store, book club. It could be your job, or a volunteer position. And then recreation opportunities like pickleball or hiking. We have some common interest.
Once you have identified some companions, because I feel like this person that emailed us has a lot of companions, a lot of people that she's coming in contact with. And we are by no means like counselors, or we don't have any like professional tips on how to bring a companionship into a friendship, but maybe just from personal experience. Have you seen companionships turn into friendships, and why do you think that happened?
Well, I think it takes courage, because you have to risk rejection. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, to invite them to coffee or to invite them to lunch or your house or whatever. And, sometimes it's just hitting the ball back into their court like they've initiated, and you just need to respond, For me, the ones that have gone from companionship to friendship, the companionship started because we were raising kids together or going to church together or homeschooling. And then the ones that turned into friendships were where we had similar values or tastes for things, or even similar senses of humor or whatever. That's where the deeper friendships developed. And I would say that it wasn't always, it wasn't quick, that to be patient, that things take time and they build on one another, don't give up. Like right now I was thinking about the example because I'm in a Bible study, and right now one of the women in the study, like when she confesses her faults or laughs at herself, I'm always thinking, gosh, that's exactly like me. I feel the same way, or I act that way or think that way, or I struggle with that too. And things that she finds funny, I find funny. And so in my mind, I've kind of thought, oh, this is a potential friend. Like I would like this to go someplace, but we've been to lunch, stuff like that. So it's slow,
right?
It's slow. And so don't give up too early.
Right. Gosh, there's so much involved in this. And we did talk about this on that podcast that the listener email was referencing. So if we could put a link to that, because we did share a lot in that as well about this particular topic. But I agree. It takes a lot of time. I think it takes a lot of managing your expectations to really be able to also forgive offenses, whether on purpose or just, you feel offended that you weren't invited or included, or maybe the invitation wasn't reciprocated. So I do believe that there's forgiveness involved. And then presenting yourself as a whole person is actually pretty important, that you're not looking for someone to fix something. You're looking for someone you can invest in, like giving of yourself, not looking for someone to give to you, if that makes sense. So then I think it can be a little more shared and reciprocated. Those are heavy topics, each of those things.
I'd like to add, too, that it's easy to look around and see other people with friendships and assume that they came easily, or and say, well, gosh, why can't it be that way for me? And when in reality, we have no idea how long it took, how much work, how much effort. Like, don't assume they didn't do anything to get that. You know,
Right.
that part isn't always visible. And I know that's something I kind of take for granted or make a false assumption that everything comes easy for someone else and it's hard for me. Not true.
Well, what happens when the thing that brought you together goes away or changes? Mindy said something last night that I do think is really true. And at first, Julie and I, at least I was like, ouch. But, you know, it is true. And I think sometimes you can't talk about what you could do about something if you won't even admit that this happens. She said that friends, and she was just saying, like, what is kind of the premise of what we're kind of getting at here. It said, friends serve specific purposes in our lives, which we've talked about today. And it may sound selfish, but it's true. If that purpose changes with what you are able to give and receive from one another, then likely the friendship will end. And I don't think it's that the two people say, our sons aren't on the lacrosse team anymore, so we're just not going to be friends. Nothing like that happens. It's just that over a gradual amount of time, you stop seeing the person as often. And I'm thinking of this one lacrosse mom. Then years later, I saw her in the dress section of Dillard's, and I talked to her for at least an hour. And if I've seen her other places, like in Trader Joe's, we'll talk for a half hour. We're totally able to catch up, and like the spark is still there. I enjoy her company. We could talk for a long time. But the friendship per se is not there because it's never really moved out of the second location. It was a friendship built around the lacrosse experience. And when that experience isn't there anymore, the friendship kind of died. And I think that's what you're getting at, Mindy.
Absolutely. I thought that was funny to see your responses to that. And I appreciate you bringing it up because I thought it was true. I still think it's true and it doesn't have to be in a negative light, necessarily. But I will say that throughout life, we're collecting treasures. Treasures are those people that are friends of the heart forever and ever and ever. And you really only have so many treasures. By the end of our lives, I hope to be able to count on two hands, the people that I would count as treasures. And if there's more, what a gift. And so, like, my friendship with you and Julie, you guys have become friends of the heart. You were friends of the road, but we don't live near each other now. We don't do the daily things, but we're friends of the heart. And so sometimes when you move or a situation changes, you can get closer to people by not being in the dailiness.
Right.
But we do have a common thing. We have the podcast.
We do. And I'll say I have another group of friends that are friends of the heart that all I do with them, y'all, is go cruising. This is the fun. It's so fun. And we pick right back up, but we don't talk all the time, but we have the same heart. We all love the Lord. We love our husbands. We love our children. Our kids are completely different. We're all in different stages. We all do very different things, but somehow we have God in common and cruising. But we all used to live in Atlanta, and I haven't lived in Atlanta, for 15 years.
So what you're saying, though, because I agree with what you said, except that you're saying that it doesn't have to be that way. You could choose to say what we have here is worth continuing, even though the thing that brought us together is gone. Like a lot of our friends came through the homeschooling world. Well, now we have to decide, is this worth continuing? Is this friendship worth continuing without our kids? Like our kids might not even be friends anymore. They've, they live in different places. And a few people that we have decided, yes, that it is worth it to keep that going. But I think the hard part comes when, like if you've moved on into new territory, new hobbies, you've moved, whatever, but the other person hasn't. And they still are sitting there waiting on the call that never comes. Like, I think that's hard. Like if both people could just move out, it would be great. But maybe when one doesn't, I think that's when the You know, and they probably will eventually, but it doesn't happen simultaneously, you know? So I think those are the deserts. Those can be part of the desert seasons when maybe other people have moved on and you weren't quite ready and you haven't.
Because to have a lasting friendship, what does it require?
I think just the desire to make it a long lasting. Like it's a choice of, do I want this to keep going, you know, or am I okay letting it drift or fall away? And so you have to be intentional if you want that. And then changing your expectations to realize that it may not look exactly like it did before.
Right. Well, I know I pray for my friends, especially the ones that I am cultivating. I pray for how I can serve them, be there for them. And sometimes I know like someone's looking to me because they're wanting a deeper friendship. And I may be the one that doesn't have space. And in that sense, that's a difficult place to be. But I think you have to have wisdom in that situation. But also I've been able to help people meet someone else that might have, then I feel like they have space for each other. And in that sense, maybe I can just be a liaison. But there's so many unique situations of being able to cultivate with other people. And then there's different types of friendships. Sometimes we need dailiness and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't have time for that.
I think long-lasting friendships take saying yes, even if you don't necessarily want to do or care about every activity you do together. Julie, I think John was one of the greatest examples of this. One, he was willing to join in just about any activity that you asked him to do, whether he really felt like that was his thing or not. He was willing to try. And two, he was very good at pursuing people until they said yes to do something that he wanted to do. And people talked about that at his memorial service, and it's very true. Speaking as somebody who, and I don't even know if I'm like an extreme introvert, but I can be introverted. And I could so easily say to myself, I don't really care that much about New Year's Eve. It doesn't really matter to me. But I knew that John was going to call and say, Steve, what restaurant are we going to? What are we going to do for New Year's Eve? Come on, you guys are not just going to not do anything for New Year's Eve. Or, same thing about Super Bowl. I don't even think he cares about the game, but he's like, we're not just...
He didn't even know who was playing.
Yeah, we're not just going to watch the Super Bowls in our homes by ourselves. We are getting together with people. And he would cajole and get people in a very nice way. But in response, we had to be willing to say yes. People had to be willing to say yes. So like, if your friend, if someone's reaching out to you and they're asking you to do an activity that you don't necessarily care about, but look at it for the deeper meaning, they're asking you to spend time together. Is this an activity that you could do? I mean, are you physically capable of doing it? Are you free that night? Like, just say yes. You'll probably enjoy it once you get out the door. But I do think that long-lasting friendships take saying yes to a wide variety of things.
Yeah, I looked this question up when we first started to talk about it, like why people have less friends in midlife. And somebody said, well, I get pickier. And I just, and I think, like if you just only want to do what you want to do and go where you want to go and eat what you want to eat, then you're probably not going to have very many friends. That's a good point. Be flexible.
Yes.
I know we do develop more preferences as we get older. I'm fighting myself all the time. I'm like, say yes. Okay. They want to get together at night. Who gets together at night? I'm tired. Okay. I've got to piggyback off Marie's comments about John. It wasn't just that he was getting people together, but when you did get together, he was going to ask you deep questions that might make you uncomfortable. And he was intentional. He would look at you. He would ask you questions that were not surface. And he was like, let's develop this relationship. And so I appreciate that. What a picture of someone who knew how to do it.
I know. I haven't learned that from him yet, but
it's uncomfortable to ask uncomfortable questions.
I know. I'd always say, how did you learn all that about that person in 30 minutes? And, and it's like, I guess he just got straight to it.
Oh, he asked.
And he really did care. He was, what I mean?
Yeah. It was genuine. Yeah. It was. And I think if we are genuine, then people are like, oh, you want to know that about me? Well, I guess I'll give that to you.
Right.
Because you look like you're going to take care of it. Like you're going to take care of me.
Oh, that's a sweet way of saying it.
Yeah. Any other tips? I hate to even use the word tips.
Be like John.
Anything you would say to encourage a listener that feels like they're in a friend desert?
Just hang in there. This too shall pass. I don't know. Those are so cliche, but you're not alone, and I think we all go through it. I mean,
and I don't think that you outgrow it. Like, I've talked to my mom about this, who's a generation ahead of me, and she will still experience this in and out of her life. Like, and that's why John's comment from the beginning comes back. Like, women are always feeling this way. Like, if you're not feeling that way today, you'll probably feel that way tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
I'd say sometimes it's real and sometimes it's perceived.
Yeah. Well, listeners, we'd love to hear from you on this topic. You can find us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast, or you can email us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. But before we go, we want to do I'm a Fan. All right, Julie, what are you a fan of this week?
All right, I'm bringing another recipe.
You're like the recipe queen.
Wow.
Yeah, I know that I save a lot of recipes I see on Instagram, probably hundreds. And I thought, okay, this week when I don't know what to fix, like, why don't I go back and just try those? So I tried a chicken that is probably the best thing I've ever cooked,
really?
Chicken-wise. And it was so tender and juicy, and it was so easy. So I want you guys to try this.
Okay. What is it?
It's called Bang Bang Chicken Skewers.
Yeah.
And it was to be made in an air fryer, which I don't have. But I had read that if you have convection on your oven, that's kind of the same thing because it's blowing hot air.
Oh.
So that's what I did. Marie, you'll like it. It only takes 5 spices.
Yay!
And they're easy, like garlic powder, garlic salt, black pepper, chili powder, and onion powder.
Okay.
You mix that up with a little olive oil and coat your chicken that you've like cut up into cubes. And it called for chicken breast, but I had boneless, skinless thighs, and I highly recommend it.
Okay.
I mean, they were melt in your mouth tender. So you just put them on the skewers. I think it was 20 minutes, flipped them over 20 more minutes. Or maybe that was 10 and 10. I'm not sure. But then you made a little sauce out of mayonnaise and sweet chili sauce. Do you know that? Do you know what sweet chili sauce is? I love it. It's not the chili sauce that looks like ketchup. It's more like in the Asian section.
Oh, okay.
It's a spicy, like a sweet and spicy. And so you mix that up and you brush that on at the end, or you could dip it in there. Nice. It was amazing. And I served it with some jasmine rice and a salad. It was so good.
Yeah. Can I come over for
dinner?
But
I think the thighs are the key. I think the thighs are the key. I mean, I'm going to try it with chicken breast, but they were so tender.
Well, chicken thighs do tend to be more moist than the chicken breast. So
it sounds amazing.
All right. I'll put a link to that in our show notes. All right, Mindy, what are you a fan of this week?
All right. I'm a huge fan of a new TV series on Prime. A long time ago when I lived in Nashville, in Brentwood, I went through the Brentwood Library once a week, filling up on books. I ended up reading all of Karen Kingsbury's books on the Baxters.
Oh.
Now it is a show on Prime. Oh. And it has been that long ago since I read the books. But I just started watching the series on Prime, and I cannot believe it coming back to me.
Really?
With this family. You guys, I read those books and I ended up reading all of them. There's so many. They got so ingrained in my mind. I got to know these characters so well. I was praying for them.
I remember that family.
Yes. You fall in love with the Baxters, and they go through hard things. And it's this family that's just trying to hold it together. They're doing their best. Nope, they're not perfect. They're seeking the Lord. And so it's on Prime. And so I just started watching that. It's bringing back all of these memories of all of the books. And it's well done.
I'm going to try it.
The Baxters.
Oh, it's called The Baxters. Okay.
It's called
and that's
The
on
Baxters.
Prime, Mindy?
It's on Prime right now. There are 3 seasons. I've just gotten through the first.
I love it when there's multiple seasons, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. All right. This week, I'm a fan of an Instagram account. It's called Julie Jones Designs, and it's Julie Jones _designs. And she also has a website that she links to on there where she offers interior design services and space planning services. But what I love about her Instagram account is she does these little videos where she takes someone's home and then she shows you how they can better space plan for what they are telling her that they want to be able to do. And she'll like mock it up and I don't know, like she'll take this tiny little room and you're like, this person wants to use this room for 4 things. I don't think they're going to be able to do that. And somehow she'll make a zone for each of them, or like a better path of travel, or just, I don't know, all the rooms are transformed. And so if you just want to follow a fun account, Julie_Jones_design.
Does she use reels to show you, or just snapshots, or what?
Yeah, it's like well, what's the difference between a video and a reel? I don't really know.
Same.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, they're the same thing. Yes, it's like videos. It's like things moving, not just still shots. So yeah. So anyways, all right, you guys, I enjoyed our talk about friendship. I'm going to keep the things that we mentioned in mind, and hopefully we have helped encourage some other people out there.
Yeah, I hope so.
I hope so. It's sweet. We got to keep trying. I'm thankful for you too. Thankful for this time together.
Yes. All right. Well, we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds great. Bye.
We're so happy you joined us today. You can find the show notes for this episode at midlifematterspodcast.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.